Have you ever been judged solely on how you look? Picture this: a 17-year-old girl wearing a faded hoodie and worn-out sneakers sits down in seat 1A of a transatlantic flight. She isn't loud, she isn't rude, she's just sitting there. But to the wealthy socialite in the next seat and a prejudiced flight attendant, her very presence is a crime. They humiliated her, mocked her, and tried to throw her off the plane. They thought she was nobody. But they had no idea that the man walking down the jet bridge, the owner of the entire airline, was coming specifically to see her. This is the story of Maya, and the instant karma that destroyed 2 careers in seconds. The air inside the first-class cabin of Trans-Global Airlines, Flight 992 from New York to London, smelled of expensive leather, faint citrus, and old money. It was a world designed to keep the chaos of the general public out. The seats were essentially private pods, equipped with noise-cancelling headphones that cost more than a median mortgage payment and champagne that was poured before the plane even left the gate. Beatrice Halloway adjusted her pearls, smoothing the fabric of her Chanel blazer. She was a woman who wore her entitlement like a suit of armor. At 55, Beatrice was the wife of a hedge fund manager and a board member of 3 different charities, none of which she actually cared about, other than for the galas. She sat in seat 1B, sipping her mimosa, waiting for the cabin to fill with her kind of people. Then Maya walked in. Maya Davis was 17. She was a slight girl with messy braids pulled back into a low bun, wearing an oversized grey hoodie that read MIT Astrophysics in fading letters, ripped jeans, and canvas sneakers that had seen better days. She clutched a battered backpack to her chest like a shield. Maya paused at the entrance of the cabin, checking her boarding pass. Her eyes scanned the numbers. 1A. She took a breath, stepping into the plush aisle. She felt the eyes immediately. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a physical weight. The businessman in 2A lowered his Wall Street Journal. The couple in 3C and 3D stopped whispering. But it was Beatrice Halloway in 1B who reacted the most visibly. Beatrice audibly gasped, pulling her legs in, as if Maya were carrying a contagious disease. Maya kept her head down, sliding into seat 1A right next to Beatrice. She shoved her backpack under the seat in front of her and sat down, pulling her phone out to send a quick text. "I'm on. It's insane. Thank you." Beatrice cleared her throat. It was a sharp, jagged sound. Maya didn't look up. She put her headphones on, standard drugstore earbuds, not the noise-cancelling ones provided by the airline. "Excuse me," Beatrice said, her voice raising an octave. She leaned over the partition. "Excuse me, young lady." Maya pulled an earbud out. "I'm sorry? Were you speaking to me, ma'am?" "I certainly was," Beatrice snapped, her eyes scanning Maya's hoodie with disdain. "Economy boarding is through the second door, past the galley. You are in the wrong section. This is first class." Maya offered a polite, tired smile. "I know. I'm in seat 1A. I have my ticket." "Don't be ridiculous," Beatrice scoffed, turning her body fully toward the girl. "Tickets for this cabin cost $12,000. Are you telling me a child dressed like that paid $12,000? "I didn't pay for it," Maya said honestly. "It was a gift." Beatrice let out a harsh, incredulous laugh that drew the attention of the rest of the cabin. "A gift? Right. Listen to me. You need to leave before you cause a scene. I frequent this airline, and I know how the upgrade system works. They don't just give seat 1A to teenagers in rags. You're obviously trying to sneak a selfie or steal the amenities. Go back to coach before I call someone." Maya felt the heat rising in her cheeks. She wasn't good at confrontation. She was a coder, a numbers person. She understood algorithms, not the chaotic cruelty of social hierarchy. "Ma'am, I have a valid boarding pass. Please leave me alone." Maya put her earbud back in, trembling slightly. Beatrice turned red. She wasn't used to being ignored, certainly not by someone who looked like they bagged groceries for a living. She reached up and pressed the flight attendant call button, holding it down aggressively until the chime sounded 3 times. "This is unbelievable," Beatrice muttered to the businessman across the aisle. "Security is an absolute joke these days." The businessman nodded vaguely, mostly just wanting to avoid eye contact with the angry woman, but his gaze lingered on Maya with suspicion too. A moment later, the heavy curtain at the front of the cabin parted. Brenda, the lead flight attendant for first class, stepped through. Brenda had been flying for 20 years. She prided herself on keeping her cabin pristine. She smiled tight-lipped at Beatrice. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Halloway?" Brenda asked, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. She knew Beatrice by name. Beatrice was a platinum status flyer. "Yes, Brenda, there is a massive problem," Beatrice said, pointing a manicured finger at Maya. "We have a stowaway. This child is refusing to leave seat 1A. She claims it was a gift. I don't feel safe with her sitting here. She looks like she's on drugs or running from the law." Brenda's eyes snapped to Maya. Her professional smile vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, hard stare. She didn't see a passenger. She saw a disturbance. She saw a hoodie in a suit and tie world. Brenda stepped into Maya's personal space, looming over her. "Miss," Brenda said, her voice sharp, "let me see your boarding pass. Now." Maya fumbled with her phone. Her hands were shaking. The hostility was suffocating. She unlocked her screen and brought up the Airline app. The QR code was there, bold and black, with the designation Seat 1A, first class clearly displayed above her name, Maya Davis. She held the phone up. Brenda snatched the phone out of Maya's hand. "Hey," Maya protested. "Calm down," Brenda snapped. She stared at the screen, her brow furrowing. The ticket looked valid. It scanned correctly in her mind, but it didn't make sense in her reality. "Where did you get this?" "It was sent to me," Maya said, her voice small. "By a friend." "A friend?" Brenda scoffed. She looked at Beatrice, exchanging a look of shared skepticism. "Which friend has 15 grand to drop on a teenager? This looks like a glitched ticket, or maybe a fraudulent purchase with a stolen credit card." "It's not stolen," Maya said, her voice rising slightly. "Please, just give me my phone back." "I'll give it back when I verify that you aren't committing fraud," Brenda said, stepping back into the aisle. "I'm going to run this through the main computer at the front. Don't move." Brenda marched toward the cockpit area, phone in hand. Beatrice leaned over the divider again, a smug grin plastered on her face. "You're in big trouble now, girl. Federal fraud is a felony. You'll be lucky if they just kick you off. They'll probably arrest you right on the tarmac." Maya felt tears pricking her eyes. She looked out the window at the rainy tarmac of JFK. She wished she could disappear. She thought about texting him, but Brenda had her phone. She was alone. 5 minutes passed. The tension in the cabin was thick. Other passengers were starting to grumble. "Can we get this moving?" a man in 3B called out. "I have a meeting in London." "We're waiting for security to deal with the girl," Beatrice announced loudly to the cabin, acting as the self-appointed narrator. "Apparently she hacked the ticket system." Maya gasped. "I did not," Brenda returned, looking flustered. She walked briskly down the aisle, but she didn't look happy. She looked confused. She handed the phone back to Maya with a rough shove. "The system says the ticket is valid," Brenda said, through gritted teeth. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "See? Thank you." "But," Brenda interrupted, holding up a hand, "I don't buy it. The system also flagged it as a special executive issuance. That code is usually reserved for board members or family. You are clearly neither. I know the CEO, Maya whispered. The cabin went silent. Then Beatrice burst into laughter. It was a cruel, cackling sound. You? You know Arthur Sterling? Beatrice wiped a tear from her eye. Oh, this is rich. Brenda, did you hear that? The hoodlum in seat 1A is best friends with Arthur Sterling, one of the richest men in aviation. Brenda rolled her eyes. Look, kid, I don't know how you got that code. Maybe you know a hacker. Maybe you stole an employee ID. But I am the head of this cabin, and I have the discretion to remove passengers who are disruptive or who make others uncomfortable. I haven't done anything, Maya pleaded. You're making Mrs. Halloway uncomfortable, Brenda said, crossing her arms. And quite frankly, you don't fit the dress code for this cabin. We have standards. There is no dress code for paying passengers, Maya argued, remembering what she'd read online. There is for suspicious passengers, Brenda countered, making up rules on the spot. Now here is the deal. I have a seat in economy, row 48, right by the lavatory. It's open. You grab your bag, you move back there, and we forget this happened. If you stay here, I will call the Port Authority police to escort you off for ticket fraud investigation. And that will take hours. You'll ruin the flight for everyone. Brenda leaned in close, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. And if you delay this flight, I will personally make sure you are banned from every airline in the alliance. Move. Now. Maya looked at Beatrice, who was shooing her away with her hand like she was a stray dog. She looked at Brenda, whose name tag gleamed under the cabin lights. Maya stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. She grabbed her backpack. She didn't want to fight. She just wanted to get to London to pay her respects. She didn't want to cause a scene or hurt the reputation of the man who gave her the ticket. Fine, Maya whispered. I'll move. Smart choice, Beatrice sneered. Don't forget your trash. Maya stepped into the aisle, head hanging low, beginning the long walk of shame toward the back of the plane. But as she passed the galley, the intercom chimed. Cabin crew, prepare for immediate gate arrival. VIP boarding in progress. Brenda froze. VIP boarding? The manifest was closed. Suddenly, the heavy forward door of the plane, the one connected to the private jet bridge used for diplomats and ultra-elites, swung open. A hush fell over the front of the plane. Two large security guards in suits stepped in first, scanning the room. And then he walked in. Arthur Sterling. He was taller than he looked on TV, wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Beatrice's car. He had silver hair and a presence that commanded absolute silence. He was the CIO of Sky Horizon, the man who had built this airline from a single prop plane into a global empire. He was known for being ruthless in business, but incredibly private. Brenda's jaw dropped. She immediately straightened her uniform, fixing her scarf. Mr. Sterling, we weren't expecting you. What an honor. Beatrice Halloway sat up straighter, flashing her most charming, seductive smile. Oh my, Arthur Sterling on our flight. Arthur didn't look at Brenda. He didn't look at Beatrice. His steel blue eyes scanned the cabin with intensity. He looked at seat 1A. It was empty, his brow furrowed. A dark shadow passed over his face. He turned to Brenda, his voice low and dangerous. Where is she? Brenda blinked, her smile faltering. Sir? Where is who? My guest, Arthur said, his voice booming slightly, causing the passengers to jump. I arranged for seat 1A to be occupied by a very important young woman, Maya Davis. Where is she? Brenda's face went pale. The blood drained from her cheeks so fast She looked like she might faint. She looked down the aisle toward the curtain separating business class, where Maya was currently standing, holding her backpack, trying to squeeze through. Arthur followed her gaze. He saw the grey hoodie retreating into the distance. "Maya!" Arthur shouted. Maya stopped. She turned around slowly, her eyes wide. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire CEO, bypassed the stunned flight attendant and the gasping socialite. He strode down the aisle, closing the distance between them. "Mr. Sterling," Maya whispered. Arthur stopped in front of her. To the shock of everyone on board, especially Beatrice, whose mouth was now hanging open, the billionaire didn't shake the girl's hand. He pulled her into a tight, fatherly hug. "I'm so sorry I'm late, kiddo," Arthur said, loud enough for the silent cabin to hear. "Traffic was a nightmare." He pulled back and looked at her, then looked at her bag, then at the direction she was walking. He looked back at seat 1A, then at Brenda. "Why were you heading to economy, Maya?" Arthur asked. His voice was calm, but it was the calm before a hurricane. Maya looked at Brenda. Brenda was shaking her head slightly, a silent plea for mercy. Maya looked at Beatrice, who was pretending to read a magazine, her hands trembling. "They told me I didn't belong here," Maya said softly. "They said seat 1A wasn't for people like me. They said I stole the ticket." Arthur slowly released Maya and turned to face the cabin. His face was no longer the face of a kind uncle. It was the face of a man who destroyed competitors for sport. Brenda felt her carefully constructed career, 20 years in the making, crumbling around her. Her professional facade, usually impenetrable, dissolved into a mask of pure terror. She took a step back, her hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Sterling," Brenda stammered, her voice thin and reedy. There must be some misunderstanding. This young woman, she was presenting a ticket that seemed unconventional. "And Mrs. Halloway here." Brenda gestured frantically at Beatrice, trying to deflect the laser-like gaze of the CEO. Beatrice, suddenly finding her voice, interjected, "Arthur, darling, it's so lovely to see you. What a surprise. I was just trying to help Brenda. This girl, she was rather rude, you see, and she just didn't seem to belong in this cabin. We were worried about security protocols, darling. You understand." Beatrice attempted a dazzling smile, hoping to charm her way out of the predicament. Arthur Sterling's eyes, sharp as obsidian, moved from Brenda to Beatrice and then back to Maya. He didn't raise his voice, but the quiet intensity of his tone was far more chilling than any shout. "Let me be very clear, Mrs. Halloway, and you, Brenda. Maya Davis is my guest. Her ticket was personally issued by me from my private allocation. There is no unconventional aspect to it. It is entirely valid, and as for belonging, Maya Davis has every right to be in seat 1A. More right than anyone else on this plane, in fact." He paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air. The other passengers, who moments ago had been openly judgmental or passively complicit, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning realization. "Brenda," Arthur continued, his voice dangerously low, "you told my guest that she didn't fit the dress code for this cabin. Is that correct?" Brenda's face was chalk white. I might have mentioned that, Mr. Sterling. It was a misunderstanding of the situation. And you, Mrs. Halloway." Arthur turned his gaze to Beatrice, who now looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "You called her a stowaway, a hoodlum, and suggested she had hacked the ticket system or was on drugs. You publicly humiliated her. Is that also correct?" Beatrice tried to rally, but her voice cracked. "Arthur, I was just trying to maintain decorum. It was a mistake in judgment, I assure you." Arthur ignored her pathetic attempts at damage control. He reached out and gently took Maya's backpack from her hand, placing it on the floor. He then placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Maya," he said, his voice softening only for her. "I want you to walk back to your seat. 1A. You will sit there comfortably, and you will not be disturbed again. Do you understand?" Maya, still reeling, nodded slowly. "Yes, Mr. Sterling." "Good," he said, turning back to Brenda and Beatrice. "Now, as for the two of you." He pulled out his phone, his thumb moving swiftly. "Brenda, I'm calling Captain Miller right now. He will be instructed to remove you from this flight immediately upon landing, regardless of destination. Your employment with Trans Global Airlines is terminated, effective immediately. Discrimination, harassment, and creating a hostile environment for a valid passenger are not merely policy violations. They are a disgrace to this company's values. You will never work for Trans Global Airlines or any of its subsidiaries ever again. Pack your personal belongings and await further instructions." Brenda let out a whimpering gasp, tears welling in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, please, I have 20 years of service. My pension." Arthur Sterling didn't even flinch. His expression was a stone wall. "Your 20 years of service mean nothing when compared to your 20 minutes of blatant prejudice and abuse of power. You made a young girl, my guest, feel like a criminal for the color of her skin and the clothes she wore. There is no excuse." Then he turned to Beatrice. "And Mrs. Halloway, your husband, Richard Halloway, is a valued client of our corporate travel division. Was. As of this moment, all corporate accounts associated with Halloway Financial are cancelled, effective immediately. Furthermore, your personal platinum status with Trans Global and any reciprocal benefits with our partner airlines are revoked. You will be flying coach, if you can even get a ticket, from now on. And believe me, your husband will hear about this from me personally, along with the detailed account of how you treated my goddaughter." The word goddaughter echoed through the cabin. Maya's goddaughter, the girl in the hoodie. Beatrice's face crumpled. "Goddaughter? Arthur, no, you can't. Richard will kill me. It was a mistake, a terrible, awful mistake." Arthur Sterling looked at her with pure contempt. "It was not a mistake, Beatrice. It was deliberate cruelty fueled by your own disgusting prejudice, and it will cost you dearly." He then looked at the other passengers. "Let this be a lesson. This airline is for everyone. Respect is paramount. If I hear of any further incidents on this flight, I assure you the consequences will be severe. Now, Captain Miller, can we get this plane moving?" A voice crackled over the intercom. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Apologies for the delay. We are now cleared for pushback." Arthur Sterling watched as Brenda, utterly devastated, walked to the front galley, tears streaming down her face. She picked up a small bag and then stood, shoulders slumped, waiting for further instruction. Beatrice, in her expensive Chanel, looked utterly broken, staring blankly ahead. Maya, still in shock, slowly walked back to seat 1A. Arthur followed her, pulling her backpack from under the seat and placing it gently in the overhead compartment. He then sat down in the seat facing her, a jump seat that was typically for crew during takeoff. "Are you okay, Maya?" he asked, his voice now gentle again. She nodded slowly. I think so, Mr. Sterling. Thank you. Please call me Uncle Arthur, or just Arthur, he said, a small, sad smile on his face. After all, we're family, and no one treats my family like that. As Flight 992 began its slow pushback from the gate, the atmosphere in first class had completely transformed. The air once thick with disdain, was now heavy with awkward silence and thinly veiled awe. Passengers avoided eye contact with Brenda, who stood by the galley door, a ghost of her former authoritative self. Beatrice, in 1B, was meticulously rearranging her personal items, her hands shaking, her face devoid of its earlier confidence. Arthur Sterling remained seated in the jump seat, facing Maya, occasionally patting her arm reassuringly. He ordered a sparkling water for her and a black coffee for himself. Maya, still processing the whirlwind of events, found herself unable to touch the water. "Are you sure you're all right, sweetie?" Arthur asked again, his brow furrowed with concern. "I should have been here sooner. I didn't anticipate the traffic would be so bad, or I would have left earlier. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." "It's okay, Arthur," Maya said, her voice still a little shaky. "I'm just shocked. I didn't think they'd believe me, or that you'd actually do all that." Arthur chuckled softly, a sound that held a hint of steel beneath its warmth. "Believe me, darling, when I say I have very little patience for people who confuse privilege with prejudice. This airline was built on hard work and inclusivity, not on snobbery. And anyone who forgets that doesn't belong here, especially when they target someone like you." He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly, though still audible to anyone who might be straining to listen. "You know, Maya, your father would be so proud of you, of the young woman you've become." Maya's eyes misted over. Her father, David Davis, had passed away 6 months ago. David had been Arthur Sterling's best friend since college, his closest confidant, and the brilliant, quiet mind behind many of TransGlobal's technological innovations. It was David who had designed the advanced flight systems and predictive algorithms that made the airline one of the safest and most efficient in the world. Arthur Sterling wasn't just Maya's godfather, he was the executor of her father's estate and her legal guardian, since her mother had passed away years earlier. Maya was due to fly to London for a special ceremony at the British Museum, where a new wing was being dedicated in her father's honor, celebrating his contributions to aviation technology and global connectivity. Arthur had insisted she fly first class, a gesture of comfort and respect. "He always wanted you to experience the best, Maya," Arthur continued, sensing her thoughts. "He always told me you had a spark, a brilliant mind. And look at you now, off to MIT next year, just like he always dreamed. Studying astrophysics, no less. He'd be beaming." The other passengers, who had been trying their best to look inconspicuous, couldn't help but overhear. The whispers began. MIT? Astrophysics? His goddaughter? And the father was David Davis, the tech genius? The David Davis? The one who invented the... Suddenly, the hoodie, the jeans, the sneakers, they weren't signs of poverty or suspicion. They were the uniform of a brilliant, grieving prodigy heading to an international honor ceremony. The very simplicity of her attire now highlighted her genuine humility, not her lack of status. The perception had completely flipped. The businessman in 2A, who had earlier given Maya a suspicious look, now cleared his throat and offered a meek smile. "Mr. Sterling, if I may, I just wanted to say, I'm terribly sorry for what happened. I didn't realize. My apologies, Miss Davis." Maya nodded faintly, still overwhelmed. Beatrice Halloway, meanwhile, was in her own personal hell. The word goddaughter and the revelation about David Davis had hit her like a physical blow. Richard, her husband, revered David Davis. Richard had personally lobbied for TransGlobal to dedicate a wing to him. And now Beatrice had publicly humiliated David Davis's daughter, Arthur Sterling's goddaughter, and likely cost Richard his biggest corporate account. Her face, previously just pale, now took on a greenish hue. She pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling with the screen. She had to call Richard. She had to warn him. But her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't dial. Arthur Sterling, oblivious to Beatrice's internal meltdown, or perhaps deliberately ignoring it, continued to speak to Maya, keeping her distracted from the lingering tension. "So, about this ceremony," Arthur said, changing the subject. "The British Museum is really pulling out all the stops. They're projecting some of your father's early designs onto the exterior of the building. It's going to be quite spectacular." Maya managed a weak smile. He would have hated all the fuss. "He would have," Arthur agreed, "but he deserved every bit of it. You know, I wanted to fly you over on the private jet, but you insisted on experiencing a commercial flight, just like he always did." "He said it kept him grounded," Maya murmured. "He said you could learn a lot about people from flying commercial." Arthur nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "Indeed, a lesson some people clearly need to learn." His gaze flickered pointedly at Beatrice, then at the front of the cabin where Brenda was still standing, her face blotchy with dried tears, her posture utterly defeated. The plane taxied toward the runway, the engines spooling up. The final safety announcements were made. As the aircraft began its powerful ascent, pushing passengers back into their seats, the collective understanding in the first-class cabin settled. The girl in the hoodie wasn't an imposter. She was not only connected to the CEO, but was herself a figure of quiet significance, a future star in a field of incredible intellect, and the daughter of a legend. The 7-hour flight to London usually passed in a blur of champagne and sleep for women like Beatrice Halloway. But today, Flight 9 in 92 felt like a prison sentence, suspended at 35,000 feet. The cabin atmosphere remained electric. Arthur Sterling had returned to his own seat for takeoff, but had instructed the purser to keep the jump seat facing Maya reserved for him, so he could move back and forth. He spent the first hour of the flight reviewing documents on a tablet, occasionally looking over at Maya, who was engrossed in a thick textbook on orbital mechanics. For Brenda, the flight attendant, the situation was a waking nightmare. Per Arthur's instructions, she had been effectively banished from the first-class cabin she had ruled for 2 decades. She was relegated to the galley, forced to prep meals while a junior flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, whom Brenda had previously bullied for her lack of experience, was given the honor of serving Mr. Sterling and his guest. Every time the curtain parted and Sarah walked through with a crystal decanter or a hot towel, Brenda felt a fresh wave of nausea. She could hear the clinking of silverware and the low hum of conversation. She knew her career was over. She thought about her mortgage, her car payments, and the reputation she had built in the industry. It was all evaporating, because she had judged a hoodie. Back in seat 1B, Beatrice Halloway was spiraling. She had ordered a double vodka tonic, her hands shaking so badly she nearly spilled it on her Chanel blazer. She stared at the back of the seat in front of her, her mind racing. Richard. Her husband, Richard Halloway, was a man who valued 2 things: money and reputation. He was currently closing a massive merger that relied heavily on international travel logistics provided exclusively by trans-global airlines. If Arthur Sterling pulled the plug on the corporate contracts, as he threatened, the merger could collapse. Richard wouldn't just be angry, he would be apocalyptic. Beatrice needed to fix this. Now. She waited until Arthur stood up to stretch his legs. He was standing near the front closet, checking his watch. Beatrice unbuckled her seatbelt and approached him, her legs unsteady. "Arthur," she began, her voice trembling. She tried to touch his arm, but he took a subtle step back, his eyes cold. "Mrs. Halloway," Arthur acknowledged, his tone flat. "I assume you need the lavatory?" "No, Arthur. Please," she whispered, glancing nervously at Maya, who was wearing her headphones. "We need to talk. About Richard. About the accounts. You can't be serious about cancelling the contracts. It would cost Holloway Financial millions. It would ruin Richard's quarter. Surely we can come to some arrangement?" Arthur looked at her with an expression of clinical detachment. "An arrangement? You mean like the arrangement you proposed for Maya? Sending her to the back of the plane because she didn't fit your aesthetic?" "I apologized," Beatrice hissed, desperation creeping into her voice. "I admitted it was a mistake. But punishing Richard for my lapse in judgment? That's not fair business, Arthur." Arthur stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Let me tell you something about business, Beatrice. Transglobal Airlines isn't just a company, it's a brand. A brand built on trust. When the wife of one of our biggest clients publicly harasses a young girl, my goddaughter, on my flagship route, it damages that brand. It tells the world that we condone elitism and bigotry. I don't condone it. I crush it." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And as for Richard," Arthur continued, "I already sent him an email via the onboard Wi-Fi 30 minutes ago. I explained exactly why his contracts are being terminated for cause, under the Conduct and Reputational Risk Clause. I imagine he is reading it right about now." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. You emailed him?" "I did," Arthur said calmly, "and I attached the audio file." Beatrice blinked. "Audio file?" Arthur pointed to a small, discreet black dome on the ceiling of the cabin. "We installed new high-fidelity cabin monitoring systems in first class last month for security training purposes. It records audio during boarding. I had the operations center pull the clip of your interaction with Maya. I sent it to Richard. He heard you call her a hoodlum. He heard you laugh at her. He knows exactly why he's losing $50 million in contracts today." Beatrice gasped, clutching her chest. She stumbled back, her knees giving way. She grabbed the edge of seat 2B to steady herself. Richard had heard her. He had heard the ugliness in her voice. Richard, who prided himself on being a man of the people in his PR campaigns, would be destroyed by this if it leaked. And Arthur Sterling held the leak. "Go sit down, Beatrice," Arthur said, turning his back on her. "We land in 4 hours. I suggest you use the time to figure out what you're going to say to your husband, if he's even at the airport to pick you up." Beatrice collapsed back into seat 1B. She felt sick. She looked over at Maya in 1A. The girl was peacefully eating a warm scone with clotted cream, looking out the window at the clouds, completely unbothered. The power dynamic had shifted so violently that Beatrice felt like she had whiplash. The girl she tried to erase was now the only person on the plane who was safe. The rest of the flight was a blur of misery for the antagonists. Brenda spent the time crying silently in the galley, wiping her eyes every time a pilot asked for coffee. Beatrice spent the time staring at her phone, which had no signal over the ocean, terrified of what would happen when the bars reappeared. Maya, meanwhile, had the flight of her life. Arthur told her stories about her father, how they used to stay up all night coding in their dorm room, how David had once hacked the university cafeteria system to give everyone free pizza. For the first time in 6 months, Maya felt like she wasn't alone. She realized that her father's legacy wasn't just the code he wrote. It was the loyalty he inspired in men like Arthur. As the pilot announced their initial descent into London Heathrow, the mood shifted again. Reality was coming to collect its debt. The landing gear of the massive Boeing 737 locked into place with a heavy thud, signaling the end of the journey and the beginning of the reckoning. As the plane taxied toward Terminal 5, the home of British Airways and Transglobal's primary hub, Beatrice Halloway turned on her phone. It buzzed immediately. 1 voicemail. 5 texts, all from Richard. Beatrice's hands shook so hard she dropped the phone. She picked it up, fumbling to read the preview on the screen. Richard, don't speak to anyone. Richard, my lawyer is meeting you at the gate. Richard, don't come home. Beatrice let out a strangled sob, clamping her hand over her mouth. Don't come home. The words burned into her retinas. The plane came to a halt at the gate. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Usually, this was the moment everyone rushed to stand up. But today, nobody moved. The passengers in first class stayed seated, sensing that the drama wasn't over. Arthur stood up and turned to the cabin. Everyone, please remain seated for just a moment. Local authorities need to board. Beatrice's eyes widened. Authorities? The cabin door opened. 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police, wearing high-visibility jackets, stepped onto the plane. Behind them was a woman in a sharp grey suit, holding a clipboard. Transglobal's London station manager. They didn't go to Maya. They didn't go to Beatrice. They went to the galley. Brenda emerged, looking like a ghost. She had removed her Transglobal scarf and pin, but she still wore the uniform. Brenda Miller? The station manager asked, her voice crisp and British. Yes, Brenda whispered. You are being removed from this vessel for gross misconduct and breach of aviation safety protocols regarding passenger manifest tampering, the manager stated. Please hand over your crew ID and your security access pass immediately. Brenda reached into her pocket and handed over the badges. Her hands were trembling. Am I being arrested? We are escorting you off the premises, one of the officers said. Transglobal has filed a formal complaint regarding your attempt to falsify a passenger incident report. You will be debriefed in the security office. Brenda looked at Arthur, pleading one last time with her eyes. Arthur didn't look back. He was helping Maya put on her backpack. As Brenda was marched off the plane, head hung low, passing the passengers she used to command, the humiliation was total. She wasn't just fired, she was being paraded as a failure. Then the officers turned back. They looked at Beatrice. Beatrice held her breath. I didn't do anything illegal, she shrieked, panic taking over. Mrs. Halloway is free to deplane, Arthur said, cutting in smoothly. Her punishment is awaiting her in the arrivals hall. Beatrice scrambled up, grabbing her Louis Vuitton bag. She wanted to get off this cursed plane. She pushed past the officers, rushing toward the exit. Wait, Arthur called out. Beatrice froze in the doorway. Maya goes first, Arthur said. First class priority. Beatrice gritted her teeth, her face burning red, and stepped aside. Maya, head held high, backpack on her shoulders, walked past the woman who had tried to humiliate her. Maya didn't sneer. She didn't gloat. She simply walked past her, radiating a quiet dignity that was far more painful to Beatrice than any insult. Arthur followed Maya, placing a hand on her back. Come on, kiddo. I have a car waiting. They walked up the jet bridge, leaving Beatrice to trail behind in the wake of their success. When they emerged into the private Windsor Suite arrival lounge, reserved for royalty and heads of state, the scene was chaotic, but not for Maya. A team of Transglobal assistants was waiting. They took Maya's bag. They offered her fresh juice. They treated her like the VIP she was. But just outside the glass doors of the lounge, in the general public waiting area, a different scene was unfolding. Beatrice exited the secure area and scanned the crowd for Richard. She saw him. Richard Halloway was standing near the barrier. He wasn't alone. He was with a man in a suit, his corporate attorney. Richard looked furious. His face was a mask of tight, controlled rage. "Richard!" Beatrice cried out, running toward him. "Oh, Richard, it was a nightmare. Arthur was so horrible to me. You have to fix this." Richard didn't open his arms. He stepped back. "Beatrice, shut up," Richard snapped. The people nearby turned to look. "You have no idea what you've done. The board is calling for my resignation if I don't stabilize the trans-global deal. You just cost us the merger." "But it was just a girl in a hoodie," Beatrice sobbed. "That girl is the heir to the Davis patent portfolio," the lawyer interjected coldly. "Do you know who David Davis was? His estate owns the rights to the guidance chips we use in our own logistics tracking. By insulting her, you didn't just lose the airline contract, you potentially locked Halloway Financial out of the tech sector." Beatrice felt the world spinning. I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a defense for stupidity," Richard said, his voice dripping with venom. "I'm going to the hotel. You're going to your sister's in Sussex. I can't look at you right now." "Richard, please." Beatrice grabbed his sleeve. Richard shook her off. "Go, Beatrice, before you make it worse." Richard turned and walked away, his lawyer flanking him. Beatrice stood alone in the middle of Terminal 5, surrounded by strangers, her Chanel blazer suddenly feeling very thin against the cold London air. She had her platinum status, her money, and her arrogance when she boarded. Now, she had nothing. Meanwhile, 100 yards away, a side door opened onto the tarmac. A sleek black Range Rover was waiting. Arthur held the door open for Maya. "Is it always this dramatic?" Maya asked, looking at the flashing lights of the police car where Brenda was being questioned in the distance. "Only when people forget their humanity," Arthur said. He climbed in beside her. "Now let's go get you checked into the hotel. You have a speech to write. And Maya?" "Yeah? Tomorrow at the ceremony? Wear the hoodie. It suits you." The great court of the British Museum was transformed. The vast glass roof, usually a window to the grey London sky, was now a canvas for the cosmos. Projectors beamed high-definition images of nebulae, star clusters, and complex orbital trajectories, the life's work of David Davis, onto the stone walls. It was a breathtaking fusion of history and the future, a fitting tribute to a man who had looked up when everyone else was looking down. The room was filled with the elite of the technology and aviation worlds. Billionaires, politicians, and academic luminaries mingled, holding flutes of champagne, waiting for the keynote address. Arthur Sterling stood near the stage, checking his cufflinks. He looked impeccable, but his eyes were scanning the crowd with a protective intensity. Next to him stood Maya. She hadn't worn the ball gown the stylists had suggested. Instead, she wore a long, flowing skirt made of midnight blue silk, paired with the same grey hoodie she had worn on the plane. MIT Astrophysics. It was a bold, jarring choice in a sea of tuxedos, but Arthur had insisted. "It's your armor," he had said. "Wear it." Meanwhile, outside the museum, a desperate figure was arguing with security. Beatrice Halloway had not gone to her sister's house in Sussex. Panic had driven her to madness. She knew Richard was inside. She knew Arthur Sterling was inside. She convinced herself that if she could just get to them, if she could just make a scene of public apology, she could salvage her marriage and her social standing. She had slipped £100 to a catering staff member to let her in through the service entrance. Beatrice, dishevelled and still wearing her travel-creased Chanel blazer, emerged from the kitchen hallway into the grand event. She scanned the room frantically. She saw Richard near the front, laughing nervously with a group of investors. And then she saw her, Maya, the girl from seat 1A, standing on the stage. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. Arthur Sterling stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here to honor a visionary. David Davis wasn't just a coder. He was a dreamer. He believed that technology should lift us all up, not build walls between us. To accept this posthumous honor, please welcome his daughter and the future of his legacy, Maya Davis. Applause rippled through the room. Maya stepped forward. She looked small against the giant projections of galaxies behind her, but her voice, amplified by the microphone, was steady. My father used to say that stars don't care who is watching them, Maya began, gripping the podium. They shine just as bright for a king as they do for a pauper. He taught me that value isn't about what you wear or where you sit or who knows your name. Value is what you carry inside your mind and your heart. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. Today, on my way here, I was reminded that not everyone shares that view, Maya continued, her voice gaining strength. I was told I didn't belong. I was told I looked cheap. I was judged for this hoodie. She plucked at the fabric of her sweatshirt. But this hoodie holds the sweat of late-night studying. It holds the memories of hugging my father before he died. To some, it looked like a rag. To me, it looks like ambition. The crowd was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. My father built systems to help people fly, Maya said, looking directly at Arthur, who smiled proudly. He didn't build them so people could look down on others from 30,000 feet. Tonight, I accept this honor, not just for him, but for everyone who has ever been told they are in the wrong seat. You belong. You always belong. The applause that followed was thunderous. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of approval. People were standing. But the moment was shattered by a shrill voice from the back. "Richard! Richard, listen to me!" Beatrice Halloway had pushed her way through the crowd, seizing the moment of noise to try and reach her husband. She looked manic, her eyes wild. "It was a misunderstanding! You have to tell them!" The crowd parted, not out of respect, but out of shock. Beatrice stumbled toward the stage, looking up at Maya. "You!" Beatrice pointed a shaking finger at the stage. "You ruined my life! Tell them! Tell them I apologized!" Arthur Sterling moved in front of Maya instantly, shielding her. Security guards were already sprinting across the floor, but Richard Halloway got there first. Richard, red-faced with humiliation, stepped out of the crowd and intercepted his wife. He didn't hug her. He didn't comfort her. "You are insane," Richard hissed, loud enough for the nearby press to hear. "Get out!" "Richard, please!" Beatrice grabbed his lapels. Richard shoved her hands away. "I filed the papers an hour ago, Beatrice. It's over. You've embarrassed me. You've embarrassed the firm, and you've insulted the guest of honor. You have nothing. Go." Security arrived, flanking Beatrice. As they grabbed her arms to escort her out, the photographers, who had been there to capture the gala, turned their lenses on her. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning. Click, click, click. Beatrice Halloway, the woman who obsessed over image, was now being immortalized in her lowest moment. She was dragged out of the great court, screaming, while the elite of London watched with disdain. The doors closed behind her. Silence returned for a second, followed by a new wave of applause, this time specifically for Maya, who hadn't flinched. Arthur turned to Maya. "Are you okay?" Maya looked at the doors where her tormentor had just vanished. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders. "I'm fine, Uncle Arthur. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm hungry. Can we get a burger after this?" Arthur laughed, a deep belly laugh. "Kid, we can buy the whole burger franchise if you want." The karma hit hard and fast. By the next morning, the video of Beatrice's outburst and leaked audio from the plane incident had gone viral. The hashtag #FirstClassKarma was trending globally. Beatrice Halloway became a social pariah. Richard followed through with the divorce, leaving her with a prenup limited settlement that barely covered her debts. She was removed from every charity board and uninvited from every gala. She was last seen living in a small apartment in Sussex, taking the bus because her car was repossessed. Brenda, the flight attendant, was blacklisted. No airline would touch her. She ended up working the night shift at a toll booth, watching cars fly by, grounding her forever. Trans-global airlines saw a spike in ticket sales, specifically from young people who loved Arthur Sterling's defense of Maya. Maya Davis went to MIT. She graduated top of her class. 4 years later, she launched her own aerospace startup. She named her first satellite the Halloway, a little inside joke, because it was designed to monitor space junk. As for the hoodie, it hangs in a frame in Maya's CEO office, a reminder that the person in seat 1A isn't defined by the ticket, but by the spirit. And that is the story of how one act of judgment destroyed 2 lives and launched a legend. Beatrice and Brenda thought they could crush Maya because of how she looked, but they forgot the most important rule of life. You never know who you are talking to. Karma doesn't always take its time. Sometimes it's waiting right at the gate to welcome you home. What do you think? Did Beatrice deserve to lose her marriage? Or was the punishment too harsh? And have you ever been judged by your appearance in a public place? Let me know your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We post fresh drama and karma stories every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, always be kind, because you never know when the CEO is watching.